So it is my great pleasure to do this evening. This evening, we've got a guest coaches, and it's a mini panel. This is intended to be a free-flowing discussion. This is not well, it is a moderated discussion. I'm going to moderate it. But feel free, if you've got questions that you've been wondering about, to ask the panel, or you've always wondered about job search and didn't know. This is going to be a great opportunity to get your questions answered. So today we have Renee Roth, Scott Harris, Mike Pavick, Rebecca Koss, and Mike Oren as coaches, talking about the things that they wish job seekers knew. So I think to warm this up, I think maybe what we can do is, rather than have you introduce yourselves, because we'll do the introductions later as the other part of the meeting. I think what I'm going to do is start off with, what do you guys, and this is for all these questions are for the entire panel, what do you see the job market as today? Is it really as good as they're saying it is? Or does it really taken a long time for people to get interviews? What are your thoughts on how the job market really is today? Is it a lie that it's just as good as they say it is, or is it hard, or is it better than you've expected? Is it somewhere in the middle?
From my perspective, I think it's more of an even playing field right now than maybe typically. There's a lot of jobs out there, but there's also a lot of job seekers. And so employers, our clients do have the ability to be a bit more selective than people think. Yeah, they've got a lot of positions. There's a lot of positions out there, but there's also a lot of people applying.
Okay. Other thoughts? Contradictions?
I agree with Scott. One thing I would say too is I feel like companies are still stuck in their old processes. In other words, they have the ATS that screens people out. They have the HR rep that screens people out. Their job is to basically disqualify as many people as they can and come up with 3 to 5 candidates. But I mean, they're using totally antiquated, not just the ATS, but even if they're doing it in person, they're still comparing job requirements. Do you have this on your resume? Qualification, perfect. They're still just trying to accidentally find the right candidate, and they're not using any kind of intelligence with it, is I'm seeing feedback from people who have been doing interviews.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with, both Scott and Renee, but I'll add to that just by saying what I said before about, they're still writing their job postings as if they were a wish list, and they're making it appear that is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement. And, I don't know if they're intentionally doing that or not, but it's actually very discouraging, and it's actually turning people away from even applying, because they're thinking, I'm not qualified, I'm not even going to apply, and they might be the perfect candidate. So yeah.
And I'm going to go right off. Rebecca's right. Working at McVie and now over here at York, the people writing those job descriptions, those job ads, are typically the hiring managers that are doing that, during lunch hour. I'm going to throw the kitchen sink and the refrigerator, and I'm going to find the perfect candidate. When I talk to my candidates, I'm saying, well, first of all, if you're in this 70% range, that's worth a discussion. Especially too, we talk to the hiring manager, say, okay, what's really important? You put 10 things, well, we found 3 things that are crucial. And then we talk to it. And this kind of, Alan, I think you were kind of talking about this, when you started this, and Renee or Rebecca just brought this up. Candidates rule themselves out. That's not their job. The candidate's job is to present themselves in the best possible light. Let the hiring manager get paid to rule them out. Their job is to present themselves in the best possible light. I had a candidate last week 30-minute technical Zoom call. He spent probably 20 minutes of it telling how he could not do the job. So yeah, it's like, well, of course he didn't get it.
Oh,
Jeez.
yikes.
So this is Mike. I wanted to add something too on the retention side. It seems like they're talking about market pricing and they're not willing to necessarily bring it up, and the people are leaving because, you know, they're not willing to discuss why should we keep you. And it's just like, you know, it depends, you know, are they chasing just the dollar? And then the other factor is the people want to work at home and they won't let them. And it's just like they're willing to leave because I think the market is hiring them if, you know, they can get what they want. So.
Very cool. Mike Pavic, you look like you had a
So-
comment.
So, you know, your original question was, you know, where do we see the job market for our candidates and, you know, versus what it's perceived as? And I think that answer is it really kind of varies by industries and by companies, you know, to kind of use an army term, right? When we go into an attack, for example, and we're attacking a defensive position, you know, we have to have a certain ratio, say 3 attackers for every 1 defender. But that doesn't mean I have to have all the force has to be 3 to 1 everywhere. I can consolidate some forces and I can hit a penetration point where I get 5 to 1 odds, you know, to get through, even though I'm like 2 to 1 everywhere else. And the job market's not dissimilar from that. There's certain points in certain industries that right now entry is very straightforward and fairly quick. And then there's ones that are still very, very competitive. On top of that, we're seeing a massive change, particularly on the white collar side, the office workers and the knowledge workers of kind of that transition of permanent remote work and these types of things too. So there's so many dynamics going on that it's hard to gauge unless you're talking very specifically. That being said, especially for these competitive positions, these positions are competitive. I've just done several interviews over the last couple of days, you know, with very good candidates that you're having to weigh then in panels afterwards, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down, you know, and there are hard choices going on. So back to kind of Scott and everybody else's comments to, you know, you don't want to self-select or self-eliminate, you know, yourself from competition. And do not be complacent because it is still very competitive. There's changes in wages, there's changes, you have more negotiating power than ever before, but that doesn't mean it's not a competitive process. And 2, that doesn't mean that hiring manager may be an old school thinker or they may be completely dynamic. So you as the candidate really need to be prepared for pretty much anything. Be prepared for the tough fight. And if it's not as tough as you thought, bonus.
Very good. All right. So the next question is, what's one area where you see job seekers get it right most often? Where do they seem to focus and get well and like nail it? Brad's got a comment. Go ahead.
One of the rules of the mind is that you ask for what you want, not what you're against. You will actually depress yourself. Your mind will be at a much lower level if you go in and are saying, well, I don't want this and I don't want this. You say what you want and the other person is feeling that emotion also.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
He's got a very good thing and I talked to this about, you know, previous clients and candidates now. This is your interview. You own this interview. This is your time with the company. Go in with that attitude and you'll project a much more positive, you know, self.
Love it. Thank you very much, Scott.
Alan, I want to, maybe we can break this question up. What do successful candidates do
Yeah.
right most often?
Yeah.
versus
Yes. Thank you. That's a
unsuccessful
better
candidate?
clarification. Yes. Go ahead. Did you want to
Tony?
respond to that?
I think networking, they know when to stop talking their resume is clear, concise, to the point, those are right there. Like I said, those are kind of the big three, I think. Because you're much better off. We always talk about it. It was on the Eagles group thing today, networking, because if you know somebody to start that discussion is much better than just sending in a blind resume.
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. And the
Oh,
other thoughts?
And
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I always have something to add. And add to what Scott said by, not just networking, because networking is very important, of course, but once you've already gotten a call for the interview, preparation. You research the company, research the job, find out what that job is all about. The information is out there. You can't say, oh, I don't know anything about. Yes, you can find out. Yes, that is your homework. That is your job to find out, and talk to people who are already doing the job, and don't just talk to one person, talk to several people. That will put you so far ahead of your competition. I can't even tell you. Yeah,
That's
definitely.
really good, Rebecca, because I just got off the phone just before this, and I had a client, and I'm asking him questions, and there was questions that he was weak on or he didn't know. It's kind of like, oh, and I kind of coach, you might want to look into that. So that's exactly thing, I'm kind of the first interview. That kind of tells you where the
Yeah.
next interview is going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what about doing mock interviews? I mean, that's a good point, Scott. Have you found people that do that and make productive use of that?
I'm typically not a big fan of mock interviews because I find that both parties go in there thinking it's a mock interview.
Okay.
I personally, and I recommended this to my clients at MACV, is go apply someplace you don't care if they offer you the job or not. Because, you go in, you get dressed for the right thing, you go in, you're on time. It's that same environment. It's the same feeling going. Then, because, you could arrange a mock interview with me. I could go through the same thing, but, everybody knows it's a mock interview.
I think mock
Interesting.
interviews can work very well, as long as you don't have a close relationship with that person. And that's why I don't do mock interviews, because it's not a good simulation. I just know them too well. They're too comfortable with me. And that's why, when I think that they could benefit, when my veterans can benefit from a mock interview, I refer them to Renee. She does a great job. She just did a mock interview with one of my veterans on Saturday afternoons. And I can't thank
Nice.
her enough for that. And I got the debrief back from the veteran, had the interview yesterday afternoon, and he said that he thought it went really well. And I said, do you think that Renee helped you prepare? Do you think that helped you, prepare for your interview? And he said that it did. So
Nice.
thank you, Renee.
You're
The other
welcome.
See,
Yeah, the other thing you can get from the mock interviews, you get your feedback too. I think that's what might make it valuable is you might not realize you're looking down at your paper or something, or
Yeah.
just little things like that. But I know what you mean, Scott, as far as the tough questions or, it just gets kind of unreal there, but it might help more when you don't know the person. So.
But even then, I mean, we've seen so many candidates just fall on their faces because they weren't prepared to answer even the "tell me about yourself" question, and it just goes off the rails in the first 30 seconds. Or the examples they use are really, really bad examples for stories that don't give you the depth, or sometimes even tell a bad, give a bad impression of candidates. So you can certainly tell which candidates have prepared walking in that door and which aren't. And if you're one of those people that just aren't comfortable doing it, you may not get you're never going to walk into the interview fully prepared. There's always going to be a question that catches you off guard. But if you can walk in there 70%, prepared, you're probably doing better than at least 50% of those other candidates.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't agree more. It relates back to the 20-minute networking meeting how you have to practice your introduction. Because your introduction is your quick commercial as to whether or not they're interested in the product, you know, and it really is. I want to jump back to even what Rebecca was saying about researching the company. It's so important to do that. In my job search, I researched the companies probably more than I practiced. It seemed like I did spend a lot of time looking at these companies. That's where I'm gonna, you spend more time working for that company and interacting with that company than you do with your own family in the work week. You know, 40 hours of that week, you're leaving your family 4 hours or something, you know, every evening to spend time with. So you're really it's something you really need to pay close attention to. And one of the examples that I have is totally unrelated, but if you've ever researched an Airbnb, or you've ever researched a nice place to stay if you're going on a vacation, and you look at it and you're just hyped because they know how to market their place, and you get there and you have a view of the alley, or you have something that just like, I didn't see this coming. That happened to me in my job search. Is I was so excited about this one company, and I went there and I walked around and I looked around, and it was a very different feeling being there than what I was seeing on the internet, you know, or where I was seeing in my research. And I decided not to pursue that company just because I had done so much research and had them, you know, my hopes up, and this is what I was looking for. And then when I got there, that wasn't what was happening. And that was a red flag. Now, I don't know if I just, you know, place judgment, but it was a red flag nonetheless. And that was enough for me to pursue other opportunities.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's
Thanks, Jeff.
actually a huge one, because part of researching is being able to read between the lines, cutting through a company's external facing marketing that they put out there. And having worked in marketing, you know, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of noise that's put out there to create a certain positive image, which is understandable. But being able to kind of read between that and do that kind of research going in, and then researching that specific position and where it fits, because you're going to start getting a generalized picture, but you still won't know where your stuff is. So you could go in the wrong direction. And so the sooner you can kind of get that generalized picture and then start targeting, you know, anything else that you need to know, you know, the better. And you get that through networking, through listening at every screening interview, and, you know, asking lots of questions, research and write down questions and then ask them.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. What advice do you see yourself giving over and over and over to job seekers?
Where shall I start? Oh God. Over and over and over again. Well, one thing that is very common, you know, when we talk about, you know, preparing for the interview, and, you know, like I'll talk to a veteran and they'll say, well, I'll say, well, okay, how many interviews have you had recently? How did it go? What kind of questions did they ask you? And oh, well, you know, they asked me what I was looking for in compensation. I'm like, here we go, right? And I told them I wanted $20 an hour, and I'm like, all right, listen. First of all, you don't start talking about salary until you've gotten a job offer. I've said that so many times, so many times.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna counterpoint what Rebecca says, and if somebody's not gonna talk money to me, they're not getting beyond me. I've got it because I've got ranges I know, and so it's like, you know, because the next person up there, it's one of the first questions they're gonna say, why don't you know what this person wants? And they're gonna they refuse to tell me. They're not gonna get beyond that. It's not, you know, there's the whole thing of he who talks money first loses. That's it's 50-50. We just have this discussion today, you know, big training. Some recruiters will talk price right away, some won't. It's not bad, you know, to understand what you're worth and express that, because that's the thing too. If you say, hey, I'm looking for this amount, and I'm like, I've only got stuff down here, I'm not going to waste either of our time. You know, if it's up here, you know, we're going to start, you know, then we can start negotiating in there. But if they, you know, that's the thing, and this is me and a lot of other people, if they refuse to talk money with us, they're not getting to the next step. So they have to research
Yeah.
what the market value is, what they're worth,
Yeah.
and be prepared to talk about money. It doesn't mean they have to throw it out there. We don't mind if they throw it out there. You know, we can have a discussion about it, but you know, it's a thing of job offer with York, a job offer is not going to be made until we know the amount, because I'm basically the one making the offer. I'm writing it out. And if I don't know what amount to put down, I can't send them forward for an interview.
So let me ask you this, Scott. What I usually tell veterans when they get asked as that question, and it could be, you know, the recruiter asking them, it could be the hiring manager, it doesn't really matter, but usually I tell them to turn that question around and say, what have you budgeted for the position? Because then they'll know, you know, what the range is, and then they can say, you know, if that's acceptable to them or it's not.
Right, and we do get that. And that's a thing too, that especially for York, we have so many positions open. You know, it's truthfully just better if they tell us, because if we're not in the ballpark, I just go into my system and I start looking for other ones. You know, but I can also then turn around and say, hey, what you're asking, that's not what the market's, you know, I'm looking at your resume, I'm looking at your experience, we've talked, that's not what the market's supporting, at least with York. It's not what we see our clients hiring at. So I can give them that discussion. And so, you know, but it kind of falls back once again on the job seeker to do a little research. You know,
Yep.
what the market value is, what
Absolutely.
they're sitting at.
Absolutely.
Well, when I went to York, I did a little research. Took me maybe 15 minutes to find out, first of all, what York's starting salary was, what about the starting salary for, you know, the industry was. So, I mean, I went in there, and when York gave me a number, I was ready to say yes.
And I think you're right with that too, is if you do your research ahead of time, you know what you're worth, you know what they're asking,
Mhm.
because you don't know when that offer is going to come. You go, no, this is just the
Mhm.
first interview, I'm not going to bother with it. And all of a sudden they're going, oh, we'd like to offer you this. And you're just like, you know, you have no idea if that's good or bad. So like Scott's saying, if you've done your research, you'll know you're in the ballpark or not.
Yeah, the way York works is that I talk to the client, and I'm the first one. And we talk about it, and we come to an agreement. I send out what we call a right to represent, and that's got an amount on it. And that's what it is. There's not a range, there's nothing that is, in essence, this is your job offer as long as the client accepts you. That's what it is. You don't negotiate with the client, you don't negotiate with the next step. You know, this is what it is. And that's, so I know we're a little bit different, but to go what Mike said, you need to be able to talk about money the first conversation.
I remember pretty vividly a lot of my discussions with Rebecca. You know, she did a lot of my job coaching, and one of the things that she kept reminding me on a consistent basis is to work my system, develop my system, my style, my system, and trust that system. So not only was I working the system that I put in place, and she helped me even figure out what was working and what wasn't. It's activities, it's pedaling the bike and not coasting those pedals and riding, you know, it's finding where you're at, what mode you're in, and then pedaling that bike and developing the activity. And it can be in job research, it can be in preparing for an interview, whatever those activities are. It's a system, because if you get the interview, now you have to prepare. So there's a process and a system for that. And so she kept reminding me of those activities within activities. They all tier to one another, so, and the ultimate goal of all of them is to get the job. But I remember, and I guess I'm just bringing that up, Rebecca, is you can talk more to that, is developing a system, trusting the system, following your processes, and just being consistent with that.
Yep, absolutely. The thing is, like, and when I worked with Jeff, he was really good about writing down his goals, the things that he wanted to do, wanted to accomplish, even the little things. He would write everything down. And every time we would meet once a week, and, when we met, we would just kind of go over everything that he had written down for his goals. And that doesn't mean that just because he wrote something down that he, was obligated to do it, because there's some things that he really didn't need to be doing. And we talked that through, and some things made sense and sometimes some things didn't make sense. But, writing goals down, writing things down, and just being able to cross things off your list. I mean, that shows that that you're motivated, that you're moving forward, that you're that much closer to reaching your goal, if that makes any sense.
Completely agree.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so next question is, what makes job search take so long, and what do smart job seekers do that shortens their time? And by how much? So
I
if you have a
would never
smartphone,
know.
what's a smart job seeker?
That was a good transition from what we were just talking about.
Yep.
And I do feel that following your tasks and your goals and meeting with a coach helped me. That helped me. I landed because it was my efforts before I was with Eagle Group, and in the beginning of trying to establish myself with the Eagle Group, from when I was founded, when I felt that foundation and worked from there, was completely accelerated once I had those systems and that in place. It was like, what made it shorter was identifying, acting, and moving forward. I couldn't say that. I can't think of any better way of saying it than to just do what we were saying. It's just do what you say you want to do.
Well said, Jeff. What I see happening a lot that makes job search take so long is, a lot of times people don't know what they want to do. They don't know what they want to do, and we'll have that first conversation. What do you want to do? What kind of work are you looking for? Anything that pays 50 grand, that doesn't help. That doesn't help. Okay. You have to know what you want to do. And if you don't know what you want to do, then you need to do some career exploration. And, you don't have to have just one, career or job in mind. You could have maybe 2 or 3. That's fine. But you've got to narrow it down. You've got to figure out what you want to do. And then once you've got that figured out, then the next step is you have to figure out, where do you want to work, right? Do you want to work for a private company? Do you want to work for government? If you want to work for a private company, what company do you want to work for? Narrow it down. That is going to shorten your time. That's going to shorten your time a lot.
That was literally what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Exactly.
I
I
have,
don't
you
know how
can't see
many
it.
times I sat with McAfee clients saying, what do you want to do? And just like Rebecca said, I want to get paid this much. Okay, if I give you, there's a foundry job out there, you're going to sweat, dealing with hot metal for 12 hours a day. Is that what you want? Oh, no, that's not what I want. So, if you don't know where you want to go, nobody else can help you get there, really.
And I've seen that happen so many times with veterans, where they want to put the burden on a hiring manager or a talent agency. You kind of figure out what I want to do. And it's obviously not going to work, because nobody's got time to figure out what you want to do. You got to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And here's the thing right now with the market. So we talked a little bit earlier about how it's changing. And so there's a lot more remote positions open, now. And so suddenly before, when you were going into it, your aperture had kind of limited itself to the Twin Cities area, assuming you're going to live in the Twin Cities area. And now it can go nationwide. Well, that's great, unless you have no idea what you want to do. Then you have even more things in front of you, and you just get totally paralyzed with indecision. So
Yep.
when you're first getting out of the service, you got to figure out what you want to do. That will speed up your job search tremendously. As you move forward, you have to figure out what you want to do next, and think through a career path. Maybe I'm doing project management, and the next position is a director of delivery or some of these other things. And do I want to do that or not? Because if the answer is yes, then I have the skills and experiences necessary to kind of quickly move into the next position, whether it's at my current company or another. If I don't, then I need to if I want to do something else, then I have to go back into that exploration process, maybe acquire new skills and education and experiences, to be able to do that. So planning out your next move is just as important as planning out your initial move.
And one thing I was going to bring up too, you said what makes job search take so long is unwillingness to ask for help. Well, a lot of veterans feel, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to burden people. And it's like, turn it back on them. If somebody asked you, would you help them? And it's, yeah, I would. And I think we get a lot of people coming to the group here even saying, I should have done this 3 months, 6 months ago, whatever it was. I didn't know about this group and I didn't ask. And so, yeah, that takes longer.
Right on.
I just want to point out on the timing thing. Obviously, I try to help folks, especially veterans, wherever I can. But my answer to them is usually however long it needs to be. And the real reason for that is, many folks have said, is that this is a path, and usually this is the milestone or a timeout in folks' life, a part of transition, where they have the opportunity to do or change their trajectory in life. But it takes some self-seeking, a gut check, and sometimes some harsh discussions by people that aren't your friends and family to set you in line, right? Hey, how much were you making before? 65,000. How much do you want to make now? 80. Well, how are we going to bridge that gap? What are the skills? Well, I want to be really good at leadership. All right, quantify that for me. Well, I don't know how. Well, then let's break that down. There are leadership positions that are 80,000, right? That if you're leading a team or you can hit deadlines and so forth. But it goes back to, well, that's going to take you more time to develop and to really tell your story and your elevator pitch and yada yada yada, right? So the reality sometimes kicks in, is like, yeah, that's exactly what they want to do, and they'll invest in it. Or no, that seems too difficult. I'll just go for this job that I was doing before, right? And get a senior position in that. So sometimes it really just takes as long as it takes for that individual to pick a course and follow through with it. And yeah, you could cut it down, but that's usually looking back, right? And I think the folks in the Eagle Group, it's quicker because in people's minds, because they did it with somebody, or they had somebody in Eagle Group sharing that journey with them and getting them to the answers quicker, because again, we're using best cases and aha moments.
Very well said.
Another thing that is going to lengthen your job search is, I don't know, some of you have seen my presentation about the job seeker modes, right? For those who have, you remember the avoidance mode, Jeff? You remember the avoidance mode, putting things off, procrastinating, making excuses why you're not getting things done. That is going to lengthen your job search. That's really going to stretch it out.
When I was there was such a heavy weight on me to get a job that I didn't know what I wanted to do. Did I want to go back to what I was doing? I was scarred. I mean, that industry that I was working in scarred me for letting me go. And I had emotional things to deal with, to say, I can't believe I just felt like I was, just tossed aside. It was a sinking feeling. And, but I remember I met with Alan, I met with so many on the panel here that, Alan said, well, let's do some exploration, and he made it fun. I was stressed about it, but I couldn't focus on anything. So he decided, well, first of all, we probably need you to consider how long can you sustain financially in order to do your exploration. So we went through some exercises to determine, can I explore for a month? Can I explore for 2 months? What do I have to support my family with that will allow me to do that? Because that relieves stress. When I know I can last for 2 months, then I can do some exploration, and that depends on how much and how deep and how vague it can be. But as we did that, we started focusing in on things that I wasn't interested in. Oh, to do this, you have to have this certification, this, and that takes that much time. I don't want to do that. So I'm like, wait a minute, it sounded interesting until I learned that. And then so I'd focus on something else, but it became fun. And I know I probably, made people roll their eyes because, I'd come in with something just off the wall, but why not? Right. And so when it became a fun exercise, it took the stress away and the pressure of finding a job away, and said, well, what do I want to do, and what's out there for me, and what's available, and exploring that, and just continuously, because then doors start opening up. And then I'm like, what Rebecca said, it's, she noticed that, oh, now I'm totally distracted because I got 15 things in front of me rather than just 2 or 3. So that's why a coach is so necessary during this whole process, because they keep that focus and keep you on the right track as a job seeker. And so that was beneficial to me. That the whole exploration is vital to understanding where you want to go, what you want to do, get over those emotional things, whatever the case. So I am back to doing something very similar to what I was doing before, but I never thought I would really go, I wasn't sure that I was going to go back until I went through those problems. And I actually, one time I was like, I'm going to work for myself. I'm going to own my own company. And what do we have? So Eagle Group started throwing things at me, resources that there's this program, there's that program, there's talking to these executives. So I started exploring into those. And I'm like, gosh, I don't know if I want to own my own company. That sounds like a lot, and here I am. I got a job with an employee-owned company.
Yeah.
So it took all those things tying together and to keep my eyes focused in many areas and bringing that in. But I guess the point of mine is the coaching along with that exploration. That's critical. Plus some of them prerequisites, knowing that you have to financially keep that in mind, and depending on your situation. So
it's interesting, Jeff and Rebecca, you guys both talk about coaching, and the thing that extended my personal job search for a long time was, what do I want to do? But yet my very first interview, which was for a project manager job, I explained kind of what I'm interested in, and the hiring manager said, that really sounds like product management rather than project management. And I'm like, well, obviously you don't understand how awesome of a project manager I would be. 6 months later, I realized, you know what? I really like product management, and I probably needed to listen to that very first interview. So some of that is one, it's kind of the myopic views that we sometimes get, especially when job search mode and you're panicking. I need to support my family. I'm getting out of the military, and I know what I've done, and I can do that. Part of that, but the other part is being able to listen, take a step back, and kind of really contemplate on that advice that you get. So sometimes eternal motion doesn't mean more progress, right? So sometimes you have to slow down a little bit to go faster and really consider, what, Rebecca, Scott, Jeff, they all just gave me great advice that all matched, except it doesn't match what I think I want to do. But if everybody else is saying that, maybe I need to think about it.
Yep. What's that saying? If one person tells you you're dumb, they're an idiot. But if 3 people tell you you're dumb, then maybe you should listen.
Or you need to find some new friends. One or the other.
Absolutely. Yes, clearly.
It can be both. It can be both. I think Jeff brought out maybe a key point too, that he would take, hey, this looks interesting to me, and bring it to somebody else. And then maybe you'll find out what part of that job was interesting to him. And also now that starts to build a picture of where he really
Yeah.
wants to go. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I'm really interested in this. Well, what interests you?
Yeah, what part
This.
of it?
The rest of it's garbage. Okay, now how do we build on that?
Yep. Yeah, very wise.
It's a really good point, Scott. You know, and sometimes when I'm talking with veterans and they don't know what they want to do, and say, okay, I'm looking at your resume right now. These are the positions that you've held before. And you're telling me, okay, you don't want to do that anymore. Okay, so, but there must have been something you liked about that job. What did you like? What about that job did you like? And they'll tell me, okay, so this is something they're probably going to be looking for in your next job, right? And so now we're starting to get somewhere.
I like it. Renee, do you have thoughts or reflections on this?
No. No, I think
Love it.
I just have to agree, you know, focus on what you're looking for, because you know, even in the past when I've interviewed people for a position, you know, I'm like, well, tell me about yourself. And they're like, well, I can do this, and I can do that, and I can do, and like Rebecca said, well, none of that's on your resume. Well, yeah, but I can do that. And they're all over the place. They don't know what they want to do. They're just applying for my job because somebody told them we had a good team or something like that. And you do have to be more focused. You do have to know what you want. You have to be yourself, know yourself, and understand, you know, what kind of work is going to really fulfill you and provide the kind of income that you need.
Very, very well said.
One of
Thank
the things that opened my eyes was with Renee when she would review my resume. So she would look at my resume and she'd ask me questions. And it was obvious to me because I wrote it. But to her, she's an outsider. She's trying to understand. And I would answer. And based on my answer, Renee is saying, well, is that something you're wanting to do? And I'm like, no. Well, then take it off your resume. And it's stuff I did, but if I don't want to market the stuff I did because I don't want to do that anymore, that was some of the best advice that she could give me as a job, you know, from a job seeker standpoint. It really helped me, and I think I've told you that before, but it was very valuable.
That's
Yeah,
a
and
great
just
point.
clear.
That's a-
I mean, you don't want to just erase half of your resume, but you want to rearrange things and put your experiences in a way that addresses the requirements of the job you're going for, not keep focusing on what you might have done in the past.
Definitely, that's a great point. I look at resumes all day long, or I'm looking at LinkedIn profiles or this or that. And I get just a few seconds to look at it. If you've got stuff that you're not interested in, I can't find what you're interested in it. You know, put it up there. My resume, generally, when I do my resume, I put like the 3 jobs that I've had that are pertinent to the job I want. You know, yeah, people will ask me about the chronological order and stuff like that. And I'll explain to them, yeah, you know, I'm 50 some years old. I've had a lot of jobs. I was in the military a long time. I've done all this stuff. These are the things that apply to this job I'm going for. And, you know, and like I said, when I'm doing searches and stuff like that, I'm putting in keywords, make sure those are there.
So be relevant is the advice.
Be
Relevant,
relevant,
be focused.
be relevant, or be gone.
There you go. That's the slogan you need to put on your LinkedIn profile.
Be relevant or be gone.
Love it. All right. So final thoughts or final comments or things that didn't get said that should have gotten said, or things that you find yourself wishing you'd say to job seekers?
One thing I say too, it's people always go, I did a great interview, I'm going to get this job, and then they stop. They stop
Yeah.
looking. And even if they get an offer, shouldn't stop looking, because I've had it before too, where especially like in contracting, it's like, yep, it's a lock, start next month, 2 weeks later to tell you, funding didn't come through, sorry. And you're just like, well, now I just haven't been looking for 3 weeks and I got to start all over. So keep the
Goofed.
process going.
That's so true, Mike. When I had one company interested in me and then I didn't get that job, now I'm kind of starting over. Got another company interested in me, didn't get that job. But later on, when I was using my systems and working forward, I'd have 5 companies interested in me at the same time. And I'm coordinating these interviews with my schedule and everything. The confidence it brings when you walk into an interview or on a virtual interview, the confidence that you have knowing there's 4 other companies that are interested in you, it shows to whoever is interviewing you and sees something that you may not realize you're even portraying to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And now I'm gonna bring it from my side of the house, is that I've got all these job requirements out here. I'm trying to find as many of those requirements that you fit as possible. So we may have talked about one job. I go into my system and you're actually quite often applying for 3 different jobs with me because I'm doing that work for you already. I'm out there,
That's
I'm
good to
looking
know.
for, okay, I've got this, 3 jobs at this one company. They're all very similar. We're going to shoot for that. Oh, here's another company. We'll shoot for that. So I'm already doing, you can do it for yourself. I'll do it for you. However, but that's not a bad way to think about it.
And
That's
I'm
pretty cool
saying
perspective.
too, even on a company where you interview well and all that, and then you don't get the job, follow up in a couple weeks or a month and just say, I really like, the way the company looks and all this stuff. And then they're probably, there's more than one job there. So they might go, yeah, well, we think maybe you'll fit this job. And so, the follow-up does too.
It's a good point, Mike. When the job that I landed, the runner-up just got hired at the same place. So they had a job position open up while I was working there for, another project manager, and they reached back out to the to the guy that was runner-up that I beat out for the position I got. So if you never know, a guy put in his retirement paperwork and they're like, wow, we got to find someone. So they got to get somebody in there to get trained. My final thoughts on this is to mainly find people you trust to work with. Find a goals, someone who help you work with goals, someone who can help you with documentation, someone who can help you, moving forward and tracking, and somebody who can help you emotional. The job search is such a roller coaster ride, but if you find people you trust, I think the length of time that you're stuck there, all those things, and the pressures and just all that takes second place to what you're doing. Just because of the people you're trusting can walk you through. So many people here can tell stories about my journey of ups and downs, and I wasn't too shy about some of those downs. And it's not very prideful moments, but they're there. That's all part of it. So that would be my biggest advice: is find people you trust to work with.
And to go on with that too, is somebody may be offered a job and the employer tells you, no, we've selected somebody else. The first person, they may turn it down, or they may start working at it for a couple weeks or months, decide they don't like it. Touching base is great. That's actually part of our process. Is if I talk to somebody and they tell me, hey, nope, I'm taking this position over here, I try and reach out to them a little later on. How are you liking that position? Do you want to stay there? Or do you want to move? Do you want to try and find something else? So never assume just because you weren't selected that, that it's because of you. It might have just been something else. You may be picked up later on.
Love it.
My first unit that I was in the Army was a scout unit, a CAV unit, which explains so much dysfunction in my life. But we had a saying of what scouts do, and that's they fight to get information. And so when you're doing that search, and they fight to help people understand what's going on. And so with your own search, you got to do that same kind of attitude where you're fighting to understand a market that might be completely new to you, especially if you're just coming out of the military or if you're doing a career transition. You have to fight to understand, yourself and kind of lower all those kind of internal defenses that we have to really say, okay, what do I really like to do? What really impassions me and gets me up in the morning? And you have to fight to get a deeper understanding of everything. And you do that by both online searches and this kind of stuff, as well as networking, and getting that human intelligence, that human insight that you can't get just from pure data. But you combine those three things, that data, that human insight, and your understanding of yourself. And now suddenly you have a very bracketable, job search that you can do.
That sounds like a presentation you need to do, Mike, is how an Army Scout finds a job.
They normally have to find a job because they get fired from their scout job for getting into too much trouble in the Army.
That's why there's contracts for scouts, so that they can't be fired.
This
Very
is
good.
great. This is great, Alan. I'm so glad you recorded this.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts or things that they're burning or final comments?
Just going back to what Mike Gorin said, this is another thing that's going to, lengthen your job search. If you stop applying for jobs just because you've got an interview, you're not even looking for jobs anymore. And I say this all the time. I'm like, okay, great, you got an interview. That is not guaranteed that you're going to get the job. And then, you find out you don't get the job. Where are you going to be? Nowhere. You're going to be absolutely nowhere. And you're going to have to start all over again. And if you're in that process of keeping up, continuing to apply for jobs, even though you've got interviews, just like Jeff said, that is going to boost your self-esteem a lot. And that is going to show through in the interview. So in the long run, it only benefits you.
Fantastic.
That keeps you have the power. You're in control. If you're sitting waiting for that phone call, if that's all you're doing all day, you're stressed. But if you're out there proactive, you're searching. The attitude different when you have that Zoom meeting or that walk in that door, that's a huge thing.
Very cool. All right. Any other final thoughts? Last word? All right. Well, in that case, then I'd like to thank the panelists for giving their thoughts, their passion, their commitment, their volunteer hours, not just to tonight, but to the community that they do every week and every day. I want to appreciate each of you for sharing your hard-won and heartfelt knowledge, and thank you for being such great coaches that you are. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alan, for putting this together. It was a good thing.